Hello, I'm Jennifer, and welcome back to the Krewe of Japan Podcast, a weekly podcast where we take you on audio journeys through Japanese culture. Welcome back to our podcast. Today, we're going to be discussing what manga is and how it differs from other forms of graphic novels. Many people are familiar with anime. It seems to be discussed more than manga in some cases. Many anime are actually adapted from manga, so we feel gaining more insight on this medium will hopefully introduce you to your favorite anime's original work. We'll have the help of our guest, Danica Davidson, author of How to Draw Manga Guides and journalist on manga and anime, to guide us through the world of manga. So we're all back, and something that we heard from our listeners, which we are delivering on today, is they want us to talk about manga. Well, how much do y'all know about manga, y'all two?
I've read a lot.
Yeah.
So.
Nice. I read a lot back in the day.
Mhm.
These days, I don't really read as much. But yeah, I had a pretty decent collection back when I was growing up, and I don't even know what's happened to all of it.
I had a decent collection too, and I do know what's happened to it. It's in a closet. It's in my closet right here. I'm looking at in boxes, just stacked up about 4 feet high. So yeah, anyone wants a manga? Let me know.
Yeah, I might have to take you up on that offer.
Yeah, I got plenty. So hit me up.
Yeah, I have a ton of manga myself. My bookshelf is kind of like a library. My friends like to come over and borrow books and exchange books. And my husband is horrified by how much it has grown throughout the years.
Jen, if you want to add to your collection for real, I got some stuff for you.
Dude, free manga? Hell yeah, I'll take it.
I didn't say free.
What?
He'll give you the One Piece for free, though.
No!
Yeah.
You can keep One Piece. I don't want that trash.
Whoa.
How about this? Okay, what was the last manga you bought?
I bought yesterday. What are you?
Wow. Okay. What was
I buy like almost every week sometimes.
Okay.
Wow.
I bought oh crap. These are like new titles, so like I'm not like 100% like comfortable with them yet. I bought A Sign of Affection Volume 3. It's a really good story. It's about a girl. She is deaf and she knows sign language. And she meets this guy who's really into like learning languages. He's like friends with all like the international students, and he notices that she's speaking a language that like he never thought of learning, like sign language. He's like, "Oh, teach me sign language." And so they become really, really close. And I don't know too much after that because the story's still going. But it really caught my eye just because I was like, "Oh wow, this is like such an interesting concept."
That is.
Sign language in a manga is a really
Yeah.
like because you can't show every sign.
Exactly. And
So yeah.
standard American sign language is Japanese sign language.
Okay.
And that's completely different. It's not the same.
Oh.
And are they showing like her thought bubbles to convey what she's saying?
Yeah.
Okay.
They have like her like internal thoughts, so like you can see like what like you can read what she's thinking. And then the author in the back of each manga, whatever sign that was featured in the manga, she kind of like teaches you like a little snippet of like why it is that
cool.
sign, and really, really interesting. I love it.
I am sold on this. I just have to say this.
Yeah, it's a really interesting
Yeah.
like story like
In the name, that's
wow.
particularly brilliant. A sign of
A little
affection.
play on
Oh
words.
Sign
my
of affection.
god!
Yeah.
Like mind blown right now.
Awesome.
What did you get this from? Barnes and Noble?
Yeah.
Well, what's the do you know the Japanese name, or is the Japanese name Sign of Affection?
Oh, I have no idea.
Props to the localizer who came up with that. That's
awesome.
good.
Yeah.
So let's take a step back. What is the difference between manga and like let's say comic books and graphic novels that we're used to in the US? Like what would you consider? I would say there's probably like 3 major bullet points or something like that, or at least 2. Like what would you pinpoint there as like differences?
Yeah, so manga, it's printed in mostly black and white. You may have like maybe 1 or 2 pages in color at like the front, just to like feature and like, oh, so pretty. Um, and then manga is printed in like book form, so like they're physical books. Whereas I find comics in America are like those paper comic booklets, kind of.
Yeah, they have graphic novels that come out too, but like they're mostly, a lot of them are floppy issues. It says the folks like to call them, but it sounds like you said they have like a printed like one cover that's color.
Sometimes, very
Sometimes.
rare, very rare.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah. Because that's one interesting thing about like American comics is that like you get everything's in color for the most part. I mean, they have some black and white series, like Walking Dead was all black and white. For some parts. But there's a lot of series that are like mostly color, and then they'll have like different artists like do variations of different covers for single issues. So that I think that is a very huge difference between the two industries. Like
Oh yeah, definitely.
there's a lot more emphasis put on cover art here, I feel like.
Yeah, no, for manga, it's whoever is the artist that is the artist for the whole entire series. Like there's no change up even for like cover debuts. Like it is what it is. Another difference is that almost always manga are long running and have multiple volumes, which is why it's fairly difficult to collect manga, because they are physical books, which like the lowest is about $10 US dollars, which can add up if you're trying to collect a 14 volume series. Or one of mine just went up to volume 43 recently, so yeah, it gets pretty pricey.
Is that One Piece?
No, it is a manga called Skip Beat, which is probably one of my favorites right
I actually
now.
have heard that one before. Yeah.
Wow.
It's so
been out for a while.
good. Anyway, sorry, we can talk about manga all day. I'm gonna try not to be a Doug. And
Whoa! Try not to be a Doug. Hey.
yeah, usually super long-winded.
I've developed this reputation on this podcast of being long-winded and just rambling on and on.
Yeah, so I'm gonna try not to pull a Doug. I'm gonna resist talking about Skip Beat only. But anyway,
You've already pulled a Doug.
You asked, so I delivered. Anyway, another thing that is very, very different, which actually stumped me when I first discovered manga, is that it's read right to left. So like kind of like reading backwards is what I called it back in the day when I like first discovered manga, because I was like, what are you doing? And my friend would be like, I'm reading. And I'm like, how do you read this? And it really wasn't that hard. So I don't know why I made it a big deal back then, but yeah.
I can't even begin to state how much of a like conversation starter this particular aspect
many conversations
is,
I
right?
started because I was holding a manga.
Everyone, they see you read. Why are you reading that book back? It's like, yeah, oh my God. I mean, you all, everyone knows.
Well, I remember the very, very early days of manga. Back when Tokyo Pop was like the brand, right?
Big,
like when you open the book, if you open like a normal American book, the first page would be like,
Yeah,
stop.
they have a
It'd be like, stop, you're reading it the wrong way.
I remember that.
And yeah, like that was like kind of like their way of kind of breaking you into it.
They don't do that anymore?
Maybe they do.
Not
I don't
really.
know.
Wow.
Not really. It's not as common as like Tokyo Pop. But Tokyo Pop back in the day did it every single manga.
Yeah.
Whereas some manga, I mean, I'm trying to look at my shelf to give examples. Like some of them still do it. And then some of them don't, because some of them are like, we've been around for a while. You should know how to read us.
Yeah. Well, I remember they used to have some publishers before Tokyo Pop started doing that would actually make it into the I guess left to right read, and they would just inverse the image.
Yeah.
So like all of the like kind of the onomatopoeia sounds that are written out in Japanese that they didn't translate or blur out or cover over, they were like inverted, so like a mirror image of whatever it used to be, because they would basically flip the book over and kind of like give you so that way you can read it left to right as opposed to right to left.
Yeah, a big person that did that was Dark Horse, which You may know them from American comics
Yeah.
as well. They kind of do both. Their title that they got licensed, Oh My Goddess, was a big player in the whole left to right normal reading for
Yeah.
us. Yeah.
I don't that kind of feels wrong.
It was the early days, right? So
It was the early
Yeah.
days. So yeah,
really early days.
for me, when I picked up that manga, because Oh My Goddess was my first manga that I picked up.
Oh wow.
So that was normal for me because I was like, oh, cool, easy mode. I get to just think about what bubbles to read first. And then I went to actual like Japanese manga orientation. And I was like, whoa, okay, what am I doing? Okay, so I just need to go backwards. So yeah.
Wait, they had an orientation for you to read manga?
No, I mean like the orientation.
I know. I know.
I'm
Sorry, I'm just being stupid. All right, okay.
Yeah.
So you had mentioned like that manga were like published in books, right? Like you buy these volumes, but are they always do they come out monthly, or what is their release like a frequency?
Okay, so in Japan specifically, it can be either released monthly or weekly publications, and this is usually done chapter by chapter in like manga magazines. So a lot of people know about Shonen Jump. That's a magazine in Japan, and you could buy it at like a bookstore or a convenience store or a grocery store, somewhere that has like a book section or a magazine section, and you could read like a chapter. Whereas when it comes to other places, such as like Europe or America, those are going to be volume releases, which have about 4 chapters in them, 4 to 5. And some authors are really, really good at pushing them out to be like every other month. And then some are really, really bad at it. So, like, I'm gonna keep going back to it. Skip Beat has been years of collecting this manga because the author is just so famous for creating these long, 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 long stories, and it takes a while to come out. So I think Skip Beat is like, I'm lucky if I get 2 volumes of Skip Beat in a year.
Wow.
Oh wow!
I think it comes like 1 volume each year. It's pretty insane. Yeah.
How many chapters are typically in like a single volume? Like one of the like kind of skinnier volumes that I'm talking about, not like the big compendiums.
4 or 5.
4?
Yeah.
Okay.
Lucky if you have 5. It's usually 4. Yeah.
So it's about like a month's worth of like chapters.
Yeah. Yeah. And then in Japan,
Okay.
once a series gets so popular because it's being read so often in those magazines, then that's when the Japanese will be like, okay, guess what? Mangaka, you get published into volumes. Yay. And that's how it happens in Japan.
Wow.
Cool.
Wow. So
Yeah.
Shonen Jump, I know you mentioned that.
Yeah.
For me, Shonen Jump was actually my first foray into manga. Before I ever bought an actual volume, I bought a Shonen Jump. So is Shonen Jump really big? Is it here, or does it also come out in Japan as well? And is it as big as it is here in Japan?
Okay, so in Japan, it's huge. The magazine's still going. It will never die, probably. In America, back in the day, so like in the early 2000s, there was a publication of their their version of the magazine, but here in America, and Viz did that because Viz
Monthly,
owns
right?
Shonen Jump. Yeah.
I had that subscription. I come in
Yeah.
mail like once a month.
Yeah, same. 2003, first year I got. That was the first foray into manga. It was a 2003 issue with Yu-Gi-Oh on the front. For some
Yeah.
reason.
Yu-Gi-Oh, Dragon Ball, One Piece, Naruto, Shaman King.
Yeah, I have to go dig it up. I can tell you the exact month. Maybe we'll throw that on the Instagram or
I
something.
think I lost those in Katrina. I can't remember.
Yeah, I lost mine in Katrina too because I did the shoujo version of that that Viz put out, which is Shoujo Beat.
Oh, that's cool.
That's what I did. But yeah, they used to have it back in the day when magazines were really popular, I guess. But magazines aren't too popular anymore, so they don't do it anymore.
Here in the U.S.
Yeah, correct, in the U.S.
Oh wow, so you can't get shonen anymore in like a store.
No.
Well,
no.
you can though get the app on your phone, $3.99 or $2.99 a month, and you get every issue of every series that they release weekly come out in English translation.
Now I have that.
Yeah, me
and
too.
It's cool.
Yeah,
but there was something special about those books,
I
man.
know.
Those monthly books and the compilation.
Just holding the
Great
book is
times.
different from reading it on a screen. So
I think it was sacrilegious. I would take the magazines, and if I found like a really cute picture, I would cut it out.
Oh, whoa, whoa,
what are
whoa,
we gonna do
whoa,
with you?
whoa, whoa.
Yeah, I was that person.
Sometimes they came with like posters and stuff,
Yeah.
Yeah, no, sometimes
Was that
I took
not
those
good
too.
enough for you?
Nope, it wasn't. Well, because back in my parents' house, guys, I'm going to show you how nerd I was. On my bedroom door is where I taped all the pictures that I cut out from like anime magazines and like printed from the internet, and just had like a huge collage of anime characters on my door. My mom was horrified.
I did that on my sketchbook for my art class. I took like, I don't know if, but I think I just printed stuff off the internet at that point. But like, I would take these pictures and like kind of like make a collage of,
I did that too for my school agenda book.
Yeah.
But yeah, I did it for my door
See,
as
I
well.
took the same route as you, Jen. I made my door my canvas as well.
Yeah.
And had Bruce Lee, Pokemon, and all those sorts of random things on there. So.
Yeah. And funny story, when Katrina was gonna hit and like we were gonna evacuate, I was like, I'm taking this.
Just took the door off the hinges.
Yeah.
What I did was, because everything was taped to my door with like regular Scotch tape, so it wasn't going to damage anything, I took like the whole mural and then I individually cut them and put them in Ziploc bags. So that way I could just bring them to go, and I could save like as many of the pictures that I cut out and printed as possible.
Do you still have them today?
I do still have them today, yes.
I think you should have took the door.
You should have taken the door.
But once manga series become super popular, then they become anime, and that is the cycle of manga.
Wow, so chapter to volume
Yep.
to anime.
That's how it goes.
Pretty straightforward.
Yep.
If you're lucky, they get you reprints and compendiums and all that fun stuff.
Yeah, definitely. Or sequels. Some
Yeah,
things get
sequels.
sequels, or reboots, or whatever.
So we mentioned shonen. You mentioned shoujo. So there are some different types of manga actually floating around out there. What are kind of the really big categories?
Yeah, so manga, is kind of different from regular books. So when you think of, I don't know, let's compare it to like young adult books that you find at a bookstore. You're most likely gonna try and pick out of like a genre, right? Well, manga, it's really marketed in categories of audience first and then genre. So for this particular reason, I'm going to give like the 5 primary manga types per like via like audience. So like we discussed, there is shonen. Shonen is geared towards like tween and teen boys. So y'all two are probably really into shonen, it seems like, from all of our anime discussions. So this is like series like Dragon Ball and Naruto and My Hero Academia. Those are your big shonen titles that you're gonna find.
Demon Slayer also falls into this category as well, I'm sure.
Exactly.
Okay. Yep.
Yeah.
Now,
Yep. One Piece.
Yeah, One Piece.
Too.
Yeah.
One Piece. Yep. That's another. So you kind of get the drift. Once you figure out a good chunk of what titles are in shonen, then you can kind of predict what other titles are in shonen. Yeah. And then there's shoujo. Shoujo is like the equivalent of shonen, but for girls. So it's tween and teen girls. So these are titles like Sailor Moon, Cardcaptor Sakura, Fruits Basket. So you can kind of get a picture of like what that entitles. A lot of school life, little dramas about love and all that good stuff. And sometimes Magical Girl, of course. And then you get more into the adult manga, which a lot of people who aren't into manga or like look down upon people for manga don't really realize is that manga is for a very, very wide audience. There's manga for everyone out there. So these next two that I'm going to talk about are for like adults. So like I'm talking 18 plus kind of adults. So you have seinen, which is for adult men. And these are going to be like your brutal, action-packed, like bloody, gory fight scene manga. So I'm talking like series like Berserk, Vinland Saga, Ghost in the Shell, which, doesn't seem like too violent, but it deals with like more mature themes is kind of what we're going for. So it's for a mature audience that maybe a younger audience wouldn't be able to comprehend all like the scenes going on.
Would you put JoJo's Bizarre Adventure in seinen or shonen?
I'm gonna have to go with shonen.
Yeah, I was gonna say I think it comes out in Shonen Jump, right?
Yes. So
What about Attack on Titan?
Attack on Titan,
Ooh.
Very
that's
bloody. So I just
Yeah.
assumed,
yeah. Attack on Titan, I think it could possibly go either way. Viz does not have Attack on Titan. That is Kodansha that has Attack
Okay.
on Titan.
Maybe that's a sign. I don't know.
It could be a sign. So I think it could go either way. I want to say it's probably seinen, but I'm not 100% sure, honestly.
Okay, cool.
And I have some of the manga too. I have up to like volume 21. So
Okay.
yeah.
So what's next?
Yeah, next is the woman version, so 18 plus for adult women, and that is josei. Josei are more mature themed manga. And when I say mature, like not all the time does it have to be like a like a romantic mature kind of thing, just more mature. So like, you know how in shoujo it's mostly about like high school girls or middle school girls. These titles sometimes deal with like working adult women, so like, or college women. So that's what they mean by seinen a lot of the times, is that your protagonist is an older woman. So that's why it's made for older women, because they can relate more. So like really fun examples are Paradise Kiss, which is a really great one. Happy Marriage, Otakoi, which is Love is Hard for Otaku, which is actually an anime on Amazon Prime. So go watch that. That was really fun for any anime fans.
Yep.
But yeah, those are some really good ones that have to do with either, college student age, or, you're already out in the working world. So super fun series there. And then lastly, like I said, manga is for everyone. And Doug, you know this for yourself as well, because you have a young child. So there are manga there for young children as well. And this, particularly in Japanese, is called Kodomo Muke. And these are series like Pokemon, Yokai Watch, Cheese Sweet Home, which is about a cat. So it's made for a younger audience. And I actually own the Pokemon manga. And let me just say, for it being a young children's manga, it's kind of dark, honestly.
Yeah.
It's really dark. I have fun reading the Pokemon manga. It's a hoot.
It's like totally different from the show and the
Completely different.
and the games, huh?
Completely different. Oh my gosh. So different. I mean, if you had to kind of compare it to something, I would probably compare it to the video games more than the anime. But I mean, it's a children's manga, but it gets pretty dark. So good read if you're a Pokemon fan like I am.
So that's a lot. There was 5 different types, and I think 5 different types. Which I don't know if it's fair to say, Doug. I know that you probably know more than both of us about like the American comic book scene. Would you say American comic books are that diverse in terms of like capturing all these different audiences?
I would say more so now than it was maybe 5-10 years ago. There's a lot of, for the longest time, it was like DC and Marvel were the big hitters, and the indie comics have really started to take more of a there's more of an option for writers and animators, not animators, illustrators, to go the route of the independent route. There's avenues for them now to release those books, and I think those have opened up the opportunities to make it more of a, not just your superhero genre type stories, it's other things out there as well. You have your horror, you have your ones, but they do have like kids stuff. Like they make, like they'll take like the
My Little Pony.
Yeah, My Little Pony. Like they'll take like Teen Titans Go. Those like kind of Cartoon Network shows. They'll just turn them into comic books.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
I would say there's somewhat. I mean, even the superhero stuff nowadays can get kind of dark and mature, more mature than if you're targeting at like a 12 to 14 to 15-year-old, because the audience is really, I'll probably say the audience is the older age for the superhero comics these days than it is for younger kids. So yeah, it's I don't know if I would say there's like 5 categories roughly broken out here, but there's definitely a kids market, and then there's a just kind of everybody else for like the I don't know if I would definitely break it out to. I'd probably go genre more so than like
I got you.
demographics.
I got you. Wow. Well, super interesting to know about manga and all these different categories. So I think I need to branch out and read some more of these.
Yes, you should. Manga's great. Like I love anime, but I really love manga. It's just I don't know. Once I open a book, I'm just like I'm in that world. I'm there. So
Yeah.
it's great. But that brings me to our interview that we had. I really wanted to get someone who was very knowledgeable about manga. And so we got Danica Davidson. She writes for Otaku USA magazine online. She mostly writes about like anime and manga. And I've been reading her manga reviews for like ever and not realizing it. um, she actually one of her reviews for manga made me pick up a series because I was so like I had like a pre like idea of a manga series and I was like, that doesn't sound that good. But then like I read her review and I was like, wait a minute, she made it sound really cool. Okay, I'm buying it. So I was glad that we got her on. So we did an interview with Danica, and she shared her insight on the significance of manga art and the creation of manga. All right. So today we're joined by Danica Davidson. Would you like to introduce yourself?
Hi, I am an author, a journalist. I cover a lot of stuff related to anime and manga. I have for years. I've written 2 books about how to draw manga. I've written 12 Minecraft or adventure novels for kids. And I have something new coming out in January, so I just enjoy good storytelling, whatever form it takes.
So do I. So we'll be good friends. Well, that's awesome. Thanks for joining us. We really appreciate it.
Thank you for having me.
Yeah, and something that we do typically before we jump into our main topics of our interviews, we ask our guests to share their connection to New Orleans, since we are a New Orleans-based podcast. If they have one, whether if you've been before, and if you have, like, what's your fondest or funniest or most unique memory, or if you haven't, what's the first thing that comes to mind when you hear the words New Orleans?
I have been there once.
Oh,
This
Once,
was
nice.
okay.
years ago. I had a really good time. I walked around and I went to Bourbon Street. I went to Jackson Square. I saw Anne Rice's house.
Oh,
I saw a
nice.
lot of nice houses. I went to the outdoor cemeteries. I saw a lot of beads on the floors, on the grounds, and then in, the touristy places. And the thing that stood out to me the most was actually doing a ghost tour of the city, because we
Okay.
just had a really good guide who told us kind of the history and legends. And I really enjoyed that.
That's awesome. Was that ghost tour in the French Quarter?
Where's the LaLaurie house? I remember that best.
Oh
Ooh.
man, all 3 locals are stumped.
Yeah,
I know.
I know. I'm like, I'm drawing a blank.
Because I remember going there most specifically, and he also took us to a place that had been, I think, an Ursuline convent.
Okay.
Okay.
Yeah, I think that was Fringe Quarter area, I believe.
Yeah,
Yeah.
that sounds French Quarter.
Okay.
Oh, that's awesome. Cool. Well, glad you were able to enjoy New Orleans, and yeah, it's a great city.
It really is. It's very unique, and at least while I was there, it's great weather. I love the sunny days and all the flowers.
Yeah, it's really sunny, especially in the summer where it's scorching
Oh
hot.
yeah. Right. And from what you were saying, is it correct to assume that you came during the Mardi Gras season?
I came in March. I was actually there over St. Patrick's Day, and I bought some St.
Okay.
Patrick's Day beads, so I'd always remember that's when I was there.
Great idea.
We have 2 parades during that time. One celebrates St. Patrick's Day, and one of them is the Irish Italian parade. So yeah, we celebrate all the time, it seems like. Well, anyway, to get started with the main topic, I kind of want to transition and just kind of ask you about your Japan journey, per se. What led to your interest in Japanese manga? And then, have you ever been to Japan? Kind of just give us your story.
I have not been to Japan. I really want to go. My father used to do business trips, and he went on a few to Japan, and he loved Japan. And he brought me back some stuff. I asked him what it was like in Japan, and I remember him saying all these grown businessmen are reading comics on the train. And he wasn't quite sure what to make of that because he hadn't seen anything like it before. And my own introduction to manga came through anime. I watched anime since I was little. I didn't know it was Japanese. I've heard a lot of people say this. It's just, it was animation. It looked different from Disney and the stuff I was typically seeing. And I would really get into it. The earliest one I remember was Unico, about the unicorn from Osamu Tezuka. And then I got into one, I think it was like the Wild Swans. There was a Little Mermaid one I really got into that had the sad, real ending. And then as a teenager, I was actually going through some really hard times. I'd moved to a new place, some things had happened in the family, and I was feeling really lonely. And anime and manga helped me get through it. I felt less alone. And I ended up making a lot of friends through anime and manga from the similar interests. So when I was in high school and really getting into this stuff, and toward the end of like around graduation, I I needed to start earning my own money. I started being a journalist in high school because of situations within the family. And at first I was just writing like for the local paper and stuff like that. And I got into another Michigan paper 'cause I was living in Michigan. It's where I am now. And I pitched one day to interview voice actors for the English versions of anime for the Michigan paper, and it turned out one of the actors was from Michigan, from the small town this paper was from, of all the odds of Michigan. And so I interviewed a number of actors from Kyokara Mao, which came out a while ago because I'd never seen anything like it. That was part of what interested me so much is the storytelling was really different but really personal and relatable. And so I took those interviews to Anime Insider, if you remember them. This was kind of the last days of Anime Insider, and they hired me to write freelance for them based on those interviews. So from there, I would take the Anime Insider stuff and pitch it to another place. So then I started writing reviews on anime and manga. I got manga stuff in Booklist and Publishers Weekly. Eventually, I got some stuff on CNN, their website, not the news. I wrote about it for MTV News for a while. That's actually what got me in there. And I eventually ended up at Otaku USA, and I've just kind of stayed there on and off for a while. Sometimes I write a lot, sometimes a little. And this past year, I've been writing for them daily on their website, which has been a real savior because it was a hard year this past year. And yeah, it was what I needed also emotionally, in addition to just I needed the work
That's great.
because it was so nice to plug into something that can be fun and escapism. You can't escape life all the time, but we need our breaks, and anime and manga can be great for that to kind of help us recharge.
Agreed. I live by that motto every day of my life.
Yeah, and you mentioned like earlier on now, kind of like that it created a world to escape to, like when you were
Yeah.
younger. That's what kind of helped you in the beginning and everything. And I feel like that's a common trend for a lot of these, like a lot of folks that are getting into anime and manga. It's so different. It's a new world
It is.
that you can kind of go
Yeah.
into and lose yourself in.
And that's what I really appreciated as a storyteller is that I was seeing stories I'd never seen before. And it's partly a different culture. I mean, because now I've been in it long enough, I recognize the tropes and there are plenty. But when it's all new to you, you're like, well, I've never seen things from this perspective. This is totally different to me. I find this fascinating. So I really like to read widely. And I also found the art very appealing. There's just an aesthetic to it. Not all of it. I mean, it has a range of art, and some things I'm more attracted to than others, but you can really see the care people put into it, and it doesn't look kind of sloppy or thrown together. And you look at anime, and there's anime where the sky looks real. Like you think you're really looking at a sky. Can you imagine an American cartoon on TV with that sort of detail? Like they'll put that detail into a movie that's going to go out in theaters, but not just a TV show. You really see the care
Yeah. I love having another anime and manga fan on here. My
here.
heart.
Wait, what am I? Chopped liver, huh?
Yeah, you are shop liver. You can barely, you can't even like go beyond the like what I need for a anime manga friend.
I gotcha.
Yeah.
Well, another thing that was interesting to me is I was very interested. There's so much anime and manga aimed for women, and obviously we have some comics in America aimed for women, but not to the same degree. And there's usually like a level of honesty
Yeah.
I find in the Japanese stuff that we might hold back from here. Well, we shouldn't say or do that. It might not look good, and they'll just throw it all out there.
Yeah, I think that's a great insight that you just mentioned. I think I agree 100% with you. Yeah.
Yeah, because that's a really nice thing. And, people point out DC and Marvel, and obviously we have a bunch of other independent comics as well. And obviously we have a lot of women who create comics and read it. But there was just something kind of organic about manga that I found there for a lot of women creators.
That's great.
Yeah, that's super interesting. So I know this is like a kind of like a heavy hitting question right here, but what is your favorite manga series? That's probably impossible to answer.
It is, and if you're supposed to answer, you're supposed to give like the one that's going to win all the awards.
No, I don't believe that. I believe whatever brings you the most enjoyment.
The one that matched my aesthetic the most, that I got the most into, was Descendants of Darkness, but it was after I watched the anime
Okay.
first.
Oh, okay. That's
I
great.
watched the anime,
Wow.
yeah, because the manga tells you more. It's also not as tight as the anime. The anime's tighter. So I
Mm.
started with that, and that's often been the case. I watch the anime, and then I have to read the manga.
Oh, that's how
And
you do it?
sometimes, yeah, oftentimes, but not always.
Oh, wow. I try to read the manga first and then watch the anime because I find if I watch the anime, I kind of just want to skip through all of what the anime has done and then just go straight to where it stopped and on.
Well, like another one of my favorite manga is Death Note, and that came after watching the anime, and the anime is just amazing, and it has so much atmosphere with the music
Yeah.
and the art, and you do miss that in the manga. So it almost felt like watching the anime Death Note first gave me the most drama because of all the
Mm,
scenery and atmosphere, and then reading the manga afterward helped add to it.
nice. Well, great two series.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. And Death Note that's a very interesting one because I've seen the anime for it, but I've never read the manga. So that has to immediately be on my list now. And I don't
Yeah.
know why I've never even thought to read the manga for it. So that's amazing to hear it is in the list of your favorites as well.
Yeah, no, that is, and I like I like the moral ambiguity you see more often in anime and manga,
Hmm.
like with Death Note, where Light comes out at first as more of a sympathetic character, and you see his descent. And at the beginning, you can understand why he's upset and he's trying to help people, and then you see the ego and the darkness take over, and he's not the same person at the end. Which is not
Yeah.
a happy ending, which is why they tend not to do that stuff over here, but that's just life sometimes and they do it in a really artistic way.
I'm just glad you didn't say that you watched the Netflix adaptation before you read the
Oh
manga.
gosh.
That would be
Well, I guess you can. There's only way. Like if you start with the Netflix one, it's the only way you can go is up, right? So anything's an
Yeah,
improvement.
true.
Anyway, to maybe kind of circle back, like I know you had Marty kind of drawn out your career path, where you've gotten to today, and you mentioned you had various roles throughout, in the
Yes.
industry, reporting on manga, or not necessarily reporting, but reviewing and doing various written publications on manga and anime.
Yeah.
Can you kind of like, how did you get into, like, was it, I know a lot of folks that like they get into their, like they get their breaks by starting to blog, and then kind of the blog leads to more like paid publications. Is that how your approach was, or was it more, did you just start submitting to, like, I know you mentioned you wrote for your local paper, but like
Yes.
specifically with anime, Like, what was your break there?
The break was doing the Kyokara mouthing for that one
Okay.
Michigan paper. And I took those articles and I sent them to different places, including Anime Insider, because the biggest thing in this career of writing is the catch 22: where have you published before? Who has paid you? Anyone can go blog.
Right.
So you may or may not get someone's attention if you've been blogging. If you have a lot of followers, that could get their attention. But ultimately, more than a degree or a blog, they want to see a track record. And the
Yeah.
hardest part is breaking in.
That's kind of what I've heard people say, is that the hardest part is getting that first paid gig, just so that way you can, the entry level job, so that way you can move up. It's hard, the hardest part.
I mean, I was writing about tractor pulls and stuff because that's what there was. I
Yeah.
grew up in California. I didn't know what a tractor pull was, but that's what I was writing about. And then with Anime Insider, I sent them my stuff. They told me I'd done a good job. They suggested maybe I could try out an article for them on host clubs.
Okay.
And so I'm like, okay, I got an assignment. And I turned around, did my research, sent it back the same day. And the editor said, we can't take this, because she assumed with that fast of a turnaround, I had written it previously or I'd plagiarized it.
Oh, no.
And I had to prove that this was my article. And then as soon as I proved that, they wanted me as a freelance writer.
Oh my gosh. Ooh.
That's crazy. They want the quick turnaround, but then if it's too
Yeah.
quick.
Yeah.
Wait, who'd you copy and paste this from?
Yes, once I proved it was my original work, I started working for them. That was all freelance. And they would just kind of catch up with me now and then and say, oh, we want you to cover this anime. And I would cover Japanese bands. It was a really fun gig. They also would do kind of quirky articles as opposed to just straight news stories.
Nice.
That's cool. It allows you to show off personality too when you're making those types of
Yeah.
articles. So that's really awesome.
And yeah, then I took the Anime News Network, because then I got more than just a local paper. I was in a glossy magazine. And I pitched that to other places. And I don't even remember the order it went in, because I wrote some stuff for Shoujo Beat briefly, because they would have articles back when they were running. And I've written other stuff too. It's just I keep going back to anime and manga because I enjoy it and there's a market for it, and a lot of writers don't understand it.
Yeah.
So it's kind of a small world, though it's growing, of people who are really into it and make it a profession.
Nice.
Yeah, absolutely. And so one of the things I think that a lot of people don't understand is what actually goes into the work of manga adaptation.
Yes.
Would you be able to kind of give us like a brief
Yes.
walkthrough for listeners that would be unaware of that?
Yes. So when you translate Japanese to English, it tends to sound very literal and very stilted. So then they oftentimes bring in adapters. And I was trying to be an adapter for all these different companies. And for a while, I was doing it for digital manga publishing. And what they would do is they would send me through email the translation the translator had done, and then they would send me the physical copy of the Japanese book. And it's all written out. So it's like page 1, panel 1, and the dialogue. Page 1, panel 2, and the dialogue. And they'll list the name of the person saying the dialogue. So you go there and match it up. And what you want to do is make it mean the same thing it already says, but sound like how we talk and have it flow. So there is an aspect where it's good to have a writer come in, because a teenage character who's skipping out on school to play video games is not going to talk the same as a very serious adult, for example. And so you have to keep that in mind and kind of give them each their own voice. And the main stuff I worked on was the Millennium Prime Minister series, which is just kind of wacky and fun. And it's about this girl, she skipped school so that she can go play video games, and she beats this guy at the arcade, and he's so impressed he wants to marry her. And oh, by the way, he's the prime minister, and he's only 25. And that was the setup for it. So
Oh my God, that's a great premise.
so when you work on that, you need to make sure the comedy comes across. And you also, or at least when I was working for them, I had to make notes whenever there'd be a little symbol, like someone might say something and then there's a little heart afterward because they're talking lovingly. I have to make note of that heart, so when they adapt it, that heart stays there. And yeah, you go through, and I think it was like every 2 weeks or something, I would need to turn it in. So it'd be a pretty quick turnaround. And some sentences are harder than others because some of it's just really baffling. How do you get this to flow and stay the same thing? And you also have to keep it within the size of the bubbles, the word bubbles. It's even harder when someone adapts a script for it to be dubbed. I've never done that because they have to match it exactly to the mouth flaps. And it's enough of a challenge for the word bubbles, I found. And also because it costs more to print more, get it as accurate as possible and flowing as well as possible and with the fewest words as possible is kind of a general rule there.
Nice.
And I got another job. Actually, I didn't
Oh.
mention this, but I tried to get in as an adapter at Yen Press, and they didn't need an adapter. But then they said they needed a proofreader, so I did proofreading for them for a while. And to get that, they gave me the hardest English test I've ever taken.
Oh, geez.
It's like, did you guys do like the DOL, daily oral language stuff in school?
I
I
can't
don't
say
think
I
so.
have. No.
Yeah.
Okay, because in my school, we'd start each day with that. If they put like a sentence up and it'd have errors, and the kids would have to raise your hand and say what the errors were. So this was just pages and pages, and they'd slip things in. And they would have these words of like, well, is that one word or two? And the one where I thought, oh, you're really clever, was they had the name Francois there, but it didn't have the little accent under the C, and I caught that. I'm like, oh, you're just testing us for everything. And so I passed that test, and I was told by the editor there that most English majors fail that test.
Wow.
Really?
Wow.
And this goes from me being a nerd who literally reads grammar books.
Hey, it paid off for you though.
Yeah, so for a while there, that's something else I was doing for a number of years. And they just send you whatever series you were working on, and I would have to keep like documents for the series of the names of characters so that, if the character's name is spelled one way on one page and another way another page, you have to know which is the correct spelling. So you have to keep track of all that. So even proofreading has a lot of work going for
Yeah.
it.
Yeah, and you even see some examples I've caught in manga where I see the names misspelled between cells. Like just I guess because of maybe different names or just not common names in the U.S. So it bypasses like editors and whatnot. But yeah, I've definitely picked that up sometimes here and there, especially the earlier years of manga.
Yeah.
Not so much nowadays, but the
People are a lot more careful now.
yeah.
In undergrad, I actually went to film school. And one of the things that we were always told in terms of writing scripts and I guess also understanding, the meaning and the themes of films, we were always taught that comedy does not translate well between borders. So what one may perceive as comedy in one country can completely miss the mark and not be funny at all in another country.
Yeah, I would agree with that.
Yeah, I was going to say you mentioned your first series is kind of has a mix of politics but also comedy in there and romance as well. But so that seems like a really interesting place to start on,
Yeah.
and a challenging one, I'm sure, as well.
Well, I wouldn't really call it that political. I mean, it's just he was the prime minister, but it wasn't realistic at all. And
Right.
if I recall, one of his male aides had a crush on him, so it had the yaoi vibes going on.
Yeah.
I wouldn't say it was much like real
Oh
politics.
yeah.
No, it was more a comedy. And that is interesting because sometimes, for example, manga that does really well in Japan doesn't get licensed here, especially if it's like too much of stuff going on there, or idioms, plays on words. You're just not going to translate very well,
Wow.
Yeah.
and that
Yeah.
is something that happens.
Well, to get on this to the subject of manga, many people these days are actually more familiar with the concept of anime. Thanks to now in the modern day, things like Netflix. Now it's really on everyone's mind, but not so many people know much about manga
Mm.
as, and I don't know why that is. So my question is, how would you describe manga to some people? And, if, because I mean, manga, some people may describe it as like a comic. So for us in the US, we think of, like you said, DC and Marvel, American comics. How would you possibly even compare and contrast Japanese manga to like American comics?
Well, that could be a long thing to talk about because they have influenced each other. We see more and more of a manga influence over here, and American comics and Disney have influenced manga as well. The art is different. Oftentimes, the characters are different. We're very superhero heavy here. There are some superhero manga, but it's not very much. A lot of people mess that up. I've had a number of people ask me about all the superhero manga because they assume comics and superheroes are just one and the same. And they're not. I would say manga tends to have more diversity in it than American comics, though we see more different types when you get more to the independent comic publishers. But one of the things that also stands out for me, as I said earlier, is a lot more female creators. And I mean, they've got kind of stories that we just don't have over here. And I just say they're honest. They're honest with people's emotions. They're honest about how people feel. They're honest in showing that people have flaws. They're honest in showing ambiguity. Not everything's completely good or completely bad. They're very good at building up stories and keeping them going. They don't just kind of reboot the same characters over and over. They have distinct arcs to them. They're very good at getting you addicted to them, I would say. They're good with cliffhangers. That was one of the first things that stuck out to me is how well they place their cliffhangers. Then you have to keep reading or watching because then you want to know what's going to happen.
Yep, I can vouch for that.
Generally speaking, I find the art more attractive in manga. That's very generally speaking. But another thing's like a lot of kids' comics here, they kind of look like they're from Nickelodeon or Cartoon Network. They kind of all have that look. And whereas in manga, kind of the Nickelodeon Cartoon Network, they kind of, the really big heads and they're kind of sloppy looking. I mean, they're cute, they're fun, but they don't have the same sort of general care, I would say, that manga tends to have of the details. There's manga out there where they'll just draw like every frill in someone's dress and stuff like that. They'll go into amazing landscape detail sometimes. They'll go for pages without any words, but you're still going along with the story. They just really suck you in, or they suck me in
Yeah.
at least.
Well, speaking of the art, if someone were to, go into a bookstore, pick up a manga off a shelf and kind of flip through it, like you said, you can immediately kind of tell the uniqueness of the art in a manga. Being that you are an author of, manga art for beginners and intermediates, how would you compare manga art to other graphic novel art forms? Like, what are the drawing techniques that you can see in manga art?
The eyes tend to stand out. People have the stereotype of the huge eyes. Not all manga has huge eyes, but they do tend to have the big dewy eyes. They have the long legs. They have kind of exaggerated, romanticized features. I mean, back in the 90s, the men's shoulders were ridiculous. They're not quite as big now, but they still kind of exaggerate things a little to what they think people like. So I just, as I said, I just really like the artwork. I have done the two books. I did it with a different artist each time, and what we really wanted to do with these books is show them really step by step of how to draw. Because you might have noticed in a lot of how to draw books, they look like a hybrid of manga and American artwork. And this is very much the manga style. It doesn't have the Cartoon Network sort of influence or the DC influence. And a lot of the art books out there also, it's like 3 steps and you're done, and who can follow that? So this has a lot more steps. It's like 15 steps or something like that. So you can really see step by step how the characters go and the attention to detail without it being overwhelming.
Well, yeah, you keep talking about the detail in manga art. So yeah, I would hope a manga art book would have more than 3 steps.
Yeah.
Well, that brings you back to like the meme out there. It's like, hey, how to become an artist in 3 steps, and it's like the picture of like a circle, and then a circle with like 3 circles in the middle, and then it's like a fully formed
Yes.
picture in step 3. It just makes you think like fully like with the shading and everything all done, and it's like, oh, just that easy.
Because the publisher actually approached me about doing
Oh.
manga art books based on my work. And I had seen the stuff that was out there, and I thought, well, if we're going to do it, let's do it this way where we really show the step by step.
Nice.
So it's not so overwhelming.
Well, more about your writing. Like you said previously, you've kind of been writing for Otaku USA magazine for quite a while now. Before we even talked about, we did this interview. We were talking before, and I've been reading your articles online for quite a while now without realizing it. But my question for you is, what is your favorite manga topics to write about and share with the community? Because I know you do like a lot of reviews for manga volumes or manga series, and then like you talk about manga news that may come out from
Mhm.
Japan. So what kind of topics do you like talking about more and writing about?
I really enjoy interviewing creators. We don't get to
Nice.
do that a whole lot, usually because of the language barrier, but I have interviewed a few creators for Otaku USA. It's also really fun when I get a breaking story. If like a publisher comes to me first because they want to announce some titles, that's a lot of fun, and it gets picked up by other places. And I mean, there really is a lot of interesting stuff, though it varies by the day how much news there is out there. Some days there's a lot of stuff, and some days there's not very much. So I'm always on the look for the more original stories of where I can get there first. And I always find it fascinating to hear from creators about what they're up to and what they're hoping to accomplish. So I always let publishers know if we can set up an interview with a creator, I'm there. I really enjoy doing that. And it gives
Nice.
us more insight into their work.
That's cool. Yeah, I feel like getting the mindset behind like what went into the story, like what the inspiration is. That's always fun. It
Hmm.
gives more meaning to like when you're reading it. You're like, oh, I see it. I get it. I'm just curious. You mentioned breaking news. Like, what is like the biggest breaking news that you've like done? If you have had a big breaking news story that you mentioned for like Anime Insider or something like that.
Well, for breaking news for anime, it tends not to get picked up by a lot of places. We get picked up like Anime News Network and a few other places.
Sure.
I interviewed a guy who did the Samurai and Shogun Rick and Morty short that got picked up by a lot of places
Okay.
because he talked about working on a second one, so that got picked up. And that was really interesting because he talked about the inspiration for that short, and it was Lone Wolf and Cub and him loving that with his father.
Oh, cool.
So of the Taco USA, that's one that probably got picked up the most. I did one that's interesting that I did recently. I don't know if this has been picked up, but a Japanese sword expert in Japan. Well, he's not actually Japanese, but he lives in Japan now, and he's an expert in their swords and works for the government. Had the fittings made for the sword from Demon Slayer,
Wow.
Oh,
and
wow.
the Suba, which is the handguard, is actually in a samurai academy in Japan right now. And so it's just kind of fun to find little quirky stories like that might not get picked up elsewhere.
That's cool. Yeah. I mean, Rick and Morty, I know like that's like instant pickup everywhere. Rick and Morty is so hot right now.
Yes.
But the Demon Slayer too. I mean, not just here, but in Japan, it's like a wildfire.
Oh yeah.
It's so popular. Yeah. So that's awesome. I didn't know about the sword stuff though.
Yeah. Yeah. I have to look that one up for sure.
Yeah, that's at Otaku USA, and he'll tell you all about it and what he's done. And the stuff was all made with Japanese craftsmen in the traditional style of making sword mountings.
Wow.
And I've written a little bit about Japanese swords for Otaku USA, because there was another one where there's characters in it named Yamada, and the clan were involved with swords, so I did a whole story on that because Japanese swords are really interesting. Their artworks, they're done in a very specific way. There's nothing else in the world created quite like them, and that's why they're so important in some anime and manga.
Yeah. Doug just mentioned like Demon Slayer. And for example, we know in this past year that Demon Slayer, like he said, is spread like wildfire,
Mhm.
Yeah.
and that specifically, that's really been the anime, but I'm sure the manga has also benefited from the wildfire and the interest in it. And so that's something we kind of see often with manga in
Mhm.
Japan. You hear about these different different series that are breaking records, or are really setting the bar really high. And so we know that manga is really popular in Japan. And you mentioned your father, when he was there, he would see grown men reading them, so they've had this appeal for such a long time. Do you feel that in the US we have that same appeal with manga, or do you feel that it's sort of maybe underrated?
I mean, it's not as mainstream here as it is there. People still give me weird looks. There's a funny story where I went to a library some years back and I was trying to get manga through interlibrary loan, and the head librarian was lecturing me on how those were not real books. And he pulled out Book List or some, literary reviewing magazine that I was writing for and said, real books are in this. And the cover had Naruto on it. I went, there, that's what it is. And he just stared at me and stared at that
Damn it.
cover and then ordered me the books. No, I think there is still something of a stigma in America. There was the whole controversy some years ago with Tales from the Crypt and stuff like that, corrupting the children, and Batman and Robin was bad for the children or something. And then there's also the issue that, like, they're not real books or they won't teach you to read as well. And for me, I just read everything. I read a lot of novels, I read a lot of manga, I read a lot of nonfiction. None of it stopped me from reading. And you see also that manga does really well in Europe and places like France where they're more used to graphic novels. And so there's not the same sort of stigma attached to it. But I will say that I think manga is getting a lot more mainstream, especially with the younger generations.
Well, yeah, and I think in the US too, you have those barriers of, you have like the Sunday funnies, like the comics in the
Mhm.
newspaper. But then you also had like, just like you said, Marvel, DC. It's very tailored towards like boys, and in kind of comic books. All of a sudden, just that they kind of get that perception that, oh, it's made for kids or made for boys or whatever. And there really is a whole subset of content out there that is available to every potential demographic out there too, so I think that's one thing that manga has done a good job of breaching those stereotype, those divides, and kind of saying like, no, actually comics can be for everybody. But I would
Mhm.
almost say they've done it better than US comics.
I think I'll agree with you on that, Doug. Yeah, because you just, not only do they categorize it by, who their target audience is, but they also categorize it to, okay, now that we figured out, what the target audience is, what do you want to read? Do you want to read a fantasy? Do you want to read, something that is more slice of life? There's so many options for a story, and that's what I love about manga. Like you were saying, Danica, like this stigma, and I definitely have felt that stigma when I was younger, both from strangers and family members. Didn't really like the look of having tons and tons of manga in my bedroom's closet, because that's the only place I could actually fit my collection. um, Gave me really strange looks. But nowadays, I'm finding, like you said, it's becoming a little better. It's really shining a light on it, because now I go to my local Barnes and Nobles, and I come to the register, have my manga on the counter, and they ask me, the usual, did you find everything well? I'm like, yes, I did. And then
Mhm.
they look at the manga and they're like, is this good? And I'm like, yeah, it's great. Like, you should read it.
Mhm.
It's about this. And they're like, oh, that sounds awesome. I need to go check it out. I'm like,
Mhm.
yeah. So, yeah, I like where manga stands now, and I hope that more people can learn and appreciate manga.
Yeah, yeah. I- Jen, you were talking about your family judging
Oh
you
yeah,
on like your
many judges.
bookshelves full of manga. It made me remember back in the beginning of college. I went on a date with somebody and was on the way back from the restaurant, stopping at my parents' house. 'Cause that's where I lived. I was going to crash in my buddy's house, or buddy's dorm room that night, and I was picking up something from my house since the restaurant I went to was by my house. And the girl I was on a date with, I was like, "Hey, just come in for a second. I got to grab my bag, and then we can go." So she kind of came in and she like walked into my room, and she saw like the shelves of manga and like the Tenchi Muyo like wall scroll and the Dragon Ball Z poster, and then that was the last time I had heard from her after that.
Oh,
Oh my god.
So,
Well, You say that, Doug. I love that story because it kind of reminds me of like when I started to first date my husband because, he would come in my room all the time. He would see the posters and the anime, very small anime collection I had back then. But he never saw my manga collection yet. So when I felt like Jonathan could really accept me for who I was, and I was like, you know what? This is going to make it or break it for me. I was like, listen, I'm about to open this closet door. What you see, just let it soak for a minute, then let me know how you feel. And I would open it, and he saw just a closet full of manga because I
He's
had
like, "Where's the clothes?"
well, the thing is, okay, so I had a shelf in my closet. So the clothes would be on the hooks, but above the clothes were like mountains and mountains of books, like manga. And I was like, okay, how do you feel now? And you know what? It turned out great. And now I have another closet full of manga, so it's great.
So Danica, do you have a closet full of manga?
No, I have bookshelves full of manga, though. I have,
There
I
you
think,
go.
17 bookcases full of manga and
Oh,
Wow.
that's so
novels.
Oh my gosh.
beautiful.
Yeah,
I would
most of
love
my
to see
wall
that.
space is covered with bookcases.
That's awesome.
Wow.
That's a dream. That's my dream right there.
So that's actually kind of segues into our next question. Like Japan as a whole it's a society that leans heavily into print media, like manga magazines. If you see like there's bookstores everywhere, like used bookstores, and if you go into their convenience stores, there's racks and racks of magazines everywhere. But they lean heavily into print manga. But in recent years, they've kind of started to transition. I mean, like a lot of countries, not just Japan, to having more digital media and digital media consumption. Um, Specifically in the manga industry, I have like the Shonen Jump app that comes out with the English translation of that week's books, like the same week. Do you think that digital manga helps or hurts the industry as a whole? Do you think it you know I, what are your thoughts on that? I know there's a big difference between holding a physical book and the smell that comes with the book and things like that
Yes.
versus reading it on a screen. So what do you think about like just digital print media in general?
On a personal level, I have mixed feelings about it because I absolutely prefer reading a print book. There's
Yeah.
no
Yes,
doubt about it.
print
Yes.
team print.
Whenever there's a book available in print, I want it in print. There's that special feeling. I don't like looking at the screen all day. I'm a writer. I look at the screen enough all day. But what I like about the digital books is that we can get more niche titles and we can get stuff we might not get otherwise. I mean, for example, we get a lot of girls' manga translated over here. We don't get a lot of women's manga translated over here. And I think they're really missing out on that. But I've noticed more of it becoming available digitally. And hopefully, if things do well enough digitally, we can get more of it in print.
Yep, I always pray for that. Every day I pray.
So, I mean, that is my sense of it. It also makes things come out faster
Yeah.
if it's digital because piracy is always a problem.
Yeah.
And I do a number of articles for Otaku to say about piracy because I hope that readers can understand that it's serious. They have this idea sometimes that, like, every manga creator is rich, the way some people think every writer's rich. No, it depends on how many copies you sell. And writers and manga creators put a lot of work into it, and they should be paid for their work the way a doctor or a lawyer is. So I do hope that making things available digitally can help combat the piracy.
Yep. I always said if you really want to read manga, you would make the sacrifices to buy the manga. Because in high school, I would, only do like a $2 or $3 lunch, and I would take the rest of the money that I got and use it to buy manga.
And to me, I don't know if this is an apt comparison, but my first job was actually in a record store, like actual vinyl records. The transition from vinyl, and of course there were CDs and cassettes and all things in between vinyl and digital. But one thing that is kind of lost in the digital transition is the physical artwork that went into designing the cover and the presentation of the music, not even of the music, but of what it was wrapped in. And so I remember, buying manga and, just loving the cover work, before I even read the story, the little intricacies that went into, designing the cover of a Naruto book, like, and that stays with you. And with the digital, sure, you get the first page, first image, but something different, about having that physical piece of work in front of you.
I agree. I know exactly what you mean.
Yeah, no, this is so much fun. I love hearing about people going through like their story just like to get to where they are today. It's fantastic to hear that, but also your insight into the industry and the opportunities you've had to cover and kind of provide a lot of people a look behind the curtain on a lot of these things that maybe they don't get to hear or see from these creators. So it's really cool.
Yeah, I mean, something of advice I give that isn't maybe the most fun advice to hear, but is helpful is start out small and build up. Because if you go to CNN and say, hire me now, they're going to laugh you out. If you've been published other places and you show up and show them your writing, then you might have a chance. And, I've written about anime and manga for these places, but there are plenty of places I've also pitched to that were not hiring or just never wrote back. You just have to keep trying.
Yeah, that transcends everything. Just keep trying. Don't give up if it's something you're really
Mm.
passionate about.
Well, I think that's great advice.
It's true. And the hardest part really is getting your foot in the door
Yeah.
because it's what have you already done? And if you haven't done anything, you have to prove it.
Yeah, and we've talked about in the past too, like you develop like kind of a network too. Once you get that foot in the door, you start meeting people who know people, and they can,
Yes.
oh, you're doing this. I
Yeah.
know this person that does X. I can connect you to. Yeah, it's
Oh, yeah.
crazy how fast it grows.
So there's very much that, and there's how one thing might lead to another that you might not expect. On my non-manga writing side and the book side, the craziest story I have is I was trying to get into American comics, and this one publisher was publishing Tales from the Crypt. We brought that up earlier, but they're doing new Tales from the Crypt, and I thought, oh, I'll write a spec script and I'll send that in. And I sent it to them. It took like a year or something before they got back to me. And they ended up buying it. They liked it. And I said, I can write in different styles. If you need a writer for anything else, you let me know. So you want to guess what they came back and asked me to do after I wrote a Tales from the Crypt horror story?
What?
Barbie.
What?
I wrote a Barbie comic. And I ended up having fun doing it. Never would have pitched it, but it came together and I enjoyed it. And I got to write about Barbie throwing a party with her sisters for the local animal shelter to get all the dogs adopted. So
Oh,
it was cute and sweet.
that's crazy. That's yeah. How you
Yes.
go from Tales of the Crypt to to Barbie.
So yeah, those are the two comics I've published in America so far. A horror comic and then like the sweetest thing ever.
You did say yourself, I can write anything. So there you
Yes.
go. They really proved it to you.
Yes, I've written a lot of different things. I hope to write a lot more very different things. That's fun for me. That's part of what I like about anime and manga is the variety. I think it's boring always reading or writing the same genre.
Well, speaking of your writing, with this interview coming to a close, I kind of want to let you have your time to kind of shout out, anything that you want to promote, whether it's new works that you have coming up or some old works that you want people to check out. What would you like to, let our listeners know about?
I would love if they would check out my website, which is danicadavidson.com. It's DANICADAVIDSON. I get plenty of Danicas with a K and Davison, so it's Danica with a C, Davidson.com. And I have published two books on how to draw manga. The first is Manga Art for Beginners, and that shows step by step with different characters. And that's like if you want to draw in your notebook and the style. And then I did a sequel to that, Manga Art for Intermediates, which is just kind of after Manga Art for Beginners, so you have some background. And I worked with Reina Seiya, who is a professional Japanese mangaka, on that one. So that one tells you what sort of software and inks and pens they use in Japan as professionals, which I'm not aware of being in any other American books on it, because she's able to give her perspective to that as well. I've also written 12 books where the main character is a boy who lives in Minecraft and accidentally finds a portal to Earth and goes on various adventures across these different worlds. Those are aimed for ages 7 through 12. And as I said, I did both Tales from the Crypt and Barbie. I had fun with both. They were polar opposites, but that in itself was kind of fun. And I have a serious nonfiction historical book
Cool.
coming out this January that's going to be completely different from anything else I've published. And as of this recording, it hasn't been officially announced, but when this plays, it might be out there. So please come check out my site and see what's up.
Awesome. Yeah, we'll definitely have to make sure our listeners go to your website.
Yeah.
Go check her out.
Quasi breaking news
Yeah.
on this
thank you.
podcast
Get
right
that
here.
breaking news. But thank you so much for coming on our podcast. I mean, I'm a total manga geek, so it really meant a lot to have someone like yourself, who is also a big fan of manga, to come on and talk with us. It really meant a lot. Thank you.
Yeah, thanks.
Well, thank you again. It was a blast talking to you and learning more about the industry.
Yeah, thank you for having me. This has been really fun.
And that's it for this week's episode. Thank you so much for tuning in to the Krewe of Japan podcast. In today's episode, we talked about manga and the distinction it has from other graphic novels. From the stories to the art, it is a unique form of literature. This week, we encourage you to pick up a manga at your local bookstore and start reading. Share your favorite manga series with us on our social media. We're on Instagram and Twitter at Krewe of Japan Podcast. That's KREWEOFJAPAN Podcast. While you're there, follow and let us know how you are enjoying the podcast. That's it for today. Until next time.